The evolution of our species is one of the most intensely studied and debated areas of modern science, revealing the precise details of how anatomically modern humans evolved from far older ancestors and spread around the world to reach almost every continent is a momentous task, and paleoanthropologists, geneticists, and scientists of many other disciplines have spent decades working out this fascinating human journey. One of the most astounding new discoveries of the last 15 years of research into our evolution is the uncovering of a previously unknown human species that lived up until relatively recently and interacted with ancient members of our own species. I'm talking about the Denisovans, close relatives of the Neanderthals that are currently only known from a few fossil remains, but that have a widespread genetic legacy among living people across East Asia and Oceania. The ancestors of Denisovans and Neanderthals, which are each other's closest relatives as far as we can currently tell, appear to have split off from the lineage leading to Homo sapiens sometime around 800,000 years ago, according to recent estimates. The exact timing of the latest split between Neanderthals and Denisovans has a few different estimated dates in different studies, but by about 600,000 years ago they seem to have both been distinct lineages from one another. However, the presence of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA in living populations of humans hints at numerous instances of our three lineages interbreeding several times in the past, once the ancestors of modern humans expanded into Eurasia sometime between 70 and 50,000 years ago. Some earlier Homo sapiens expansions out of Africa had also occurred, but they were not permanent ones. Once contact between our lineages occurred, interbreeding seemed to have been inevitable. It was just the human way. This has resulted in approximately 20% of the Neanderthal genome actually surviving to the modern day in various populations, with Eurasian populations in particular having Neanderthal DNA in up to 4% of the genome, and some estimates putting it even higher than this. Denisovans, meanwhile, survive today in the genetic heritage of various populations in Asia and Oceania, being found in especially significant proportions in the genomes of Aboriginal Australians, Near-Oceanians, Polynesians, Fijians, East Indonesians, and Mamanwa. Additionally, some lower levels of Denisovan ancestry have been detected in populations on the East Asian mainland, in Siberian and Native American populations too. There's also extensive evidence of interbreeding events, technically known as introgressions, between the Neanderthals and the Denisovans after their lineages split from one another. But as well as this, several recent studies have also detected evidence that the ancestors of modern humans, Denisovans and Neanderthals, came into contact with yet more, even older lineages of unknown humans, and interbred with them too. These mysterious ghost populations of human-like beings have been termed the Super-Archaics. Much of the evidence for them has not been found as physical fossils, but instead they reside within the genomes of people alive today. So who were these Super-Archaic humans? Well, they likely have a few different identities, as they represent different populations of long-dead human lineages that had interactions with the Denisovan, Neanderthal, and potentially modern human ancestors. One of the first indications for the existence of the mystery Super-Archaics was discovered in 2014, when geneticists examined the structure of the genomes from several Neanderthal and Denisovan fossil samples. The scientists found discrepancies in the Denisovan genome that were best explained by a scenario in which Denisovans had, at one point, come into contact with an unknown human species that had split from the rest of the human lineage sometime between 0.9 and 4 million years ago. This means these others were rather distantly related, and yet they were still human enough to pass on their genes to the Denisovans. In 2020, further evidence of a tryst between Denisovans and the unknown humans was detected. Scientists examined more genomes from Neanderthals, Denisovans, and living human populations, and uncovered additional supporting signals of interbreeding between Super-Archaics and Denisovans. Not only that, but these scientists also identified signals of a much older interbreeding event too. The common ancestors of the Neanderthals and Denisovans are referred to by some scientists as the Neandersovans. Makes sense. And in this 2020 study, geneticists found indications that in addition to the Denisovan Super-Archaic breeding event, the Neandersovans had also interbred with Super-Archaics hundreds of thousands of years earlier. This event would have taken place at least 600,000 years ago, and again the Super-Archaics involved here were estimated to have been separated from all other human lineages for a very long time, diverging sometime around 2 million years ago. This study also estimated the population size of the Super-Archaics, finding that they had a relatively large one of between 20 to 50,000 individuals. Quite a haunting thought to realise that there once existed so many individuals of these almost humans, now lost in the mysterious depths of history. So back to the question of who these Super-Archaics were. The two distinct episodes of interbreeding, first in the Neandersovans and then hundreds of thousands of years later in the Denisovans, seem to suggest that at least two populations of Super-Archaics were involved. The interbreeding also must have happened outside of Africa, as that's where the Neanderthals and Denisovans first appeared. So it's possible that the Super-Archaics were members of the first wave of humans to leave Africa, and descended from the original human settlers of Eurasia that made it here long before the most recent colonization of the rest of the world by our own ancestors. The earliest human expansion out of Africa that we currently know of for certain was undertaken by Homo erectus, or at least something very much like it, as the specifics of what can be classified as Homo erectus are still debated. So a very archaic species such as Homo erectus, which did indeed appear sometime around 2 million years ago, might be the culprit for these ancient interbreeding events. These super-archaic possible descendants of early Homo erectus migrations out of Africa must have been inhabiting Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years, and were probably mostly isolated from other human populations in Africa. Then, starting about 700,000 years ago, the Neandersovans made their way to Eurasia and began encountering these indigenous super-archaics, and then, naturally, mating followed. But then the later interbreeding episode, after the Denisovans had split from the Neanderthals, appears to have occurred with a deeply divided subpopulation of the Super-Archaics. Whether or not these were potentially still Homo erectus or something similar cannot be determined with certainty, and so there's still an air of mystery about the true identity of these very ancient people. Furthermore, whoever these Super-Archaics were, they still live on today thanks to the later interbreeding events between Denisovans and modern humans, surviving in the genetic code of people with Denisovan heritage. In fact, one study calculated that a total of 4 megabases, a unit of measurement for DNA length, from these Super-Archaics has been passed on to modern populations. The scientists who discovered the more ancient introgression also suggest that the ultimate fate of these indigenous Eurasian humans was that they ended up being largely replaced by the Neandersovans as they spread across the continents, a fate that appears to have been mirrored many hundreds of thousands of years later as modern humans expanded to regions where Neanderthals and Denisovans lived. But evidence for direct super-archaic interbreeding has not only been found in the genomes of Neanderthals and Denisovans. Several other studies have discovered potential signs of influence from archaic humans in the genes of modern African populations, which indicate that some other kind of human species may have interbred with the ancestors of all living humans before the most recent out-of-Africa migration. In another 2020 study, these particular archaic humans were calculated to have diverged before the Neandersovans split off from modern human ancestors, meaning this was another ancient ghost population that was pretty distantly related to us. Analysing the genomes of 4 modern West African populations, geneticists found signals that they argued were best explained by significant genetic contributions originating from this ghost population of humans. Similarly, people of Han Chinese descent, as well as people with Northern and Western European ancestry, showed some analogous signals in their genomes too, suggesting that this introgression event must have occurred before the split between African and non-African populations. So is this evidence of yet another species of super-archaic human that's only known from genetic signals? The identity of the human species is once again unclear, and it's only known that they were unrelated to Neanderthals or Denisovans. Might it therefore be an indication that some mysterious archaic population of humans actually survived in Africa until recent enough times to breed with modern human ancestors? Well, perhaps not. As I mentioned, it's the existence of particular genetic signals in modern African populations that has been argued to be best explained by contributions from ghost populations. However, another explanation for these signals has been offered in a paper published in 2023 that seems to fit the genetic data much better. And this explanation doesn't involve genes flowing from super-archaic humans. Instead, it attributes the signals to extended periods of gene flow between two or more ancestral populations of modern humans, over timescales of hundreds of thousands of years. So, essentially, the geneticists are here arguing that a long history of Homo sapiens populations migrating and breeding with each other across different regions of Africa for significant lengths of time can explain what had been interpreted by other researchers as contributions from archaic humans. This model of human population history therefore also shows that our species, in its modern form, did not have a single origin at one particular point in Africa. Rather, we can trace our origins back to a number of different connected stem populations located across the African continent. These populations came together and fragmented at different points in time, ultimately leading to the population structures seen in modern-day Africa. However, the researchers also disclosed that they can't rule out some contributions from archaic humans as well, and it may be that a combination of these events could still best explain the genetic data.
Recently, things have gotten even more complicated, as another study used a different model of genetic analysis and found that all modern humans are in fact the product of a major interbreeding episode between two deeply diverged hominin lineages that took place about 300,000 years ago. This research again found that a major hybridization event best explains the genetic signals in living populations, and calculated that a super-archaic human species that had separated from others about 1.5 million years ago contributed to around 20% of the ancestry of all modern people. The study also found that, immediately after these lineages split some 1.5 million years ago, the population that would eventually contribute to 80% of our ancestry underwent a severe bottleneck. Although we can't say for certain, this bottleneck may have been the result of a founder event, meaning that it was an initially rather small population that became separated. This population size then gradually increased over the next few hundreds of thousands of years until the introgression happened. According to this reconstruction of human population dynamics, the Neandersovans split from this initially small-sized divergent lineage as well, but before the introgression happened, meaning the Denisovans and Neanderthals do not seem to have interbred with this particular super-archaic branch. This all has some pretty major ramifications, with one of the most fascinating aspects being that it infers all living humans are, to some extent, hybrids descended from two pretty distantly related hominin species. Once again, the identity of the super-archaic lineage, the one referred to as lineage B, has been suggested to be Homo erectus, or something of that grade. Lineage A might then have been Homo heidelbergensis, which has previously been considered as a potential ancestor to modern humans plus Neanderthals and Denisovans. But, as with all things in human evolution, this has also been contested. This study also doesn't discount the hypothesis that some much more recent interbreeding events in Africa might have occurred too, potentially within the last 150,000 years, and suggests that such recent introgressions might even explain some of the results from their model of analysing the genetic data. So there could indeed have been even more mystery archaic humans in Africa within the past 150,000 years that were passing on some of their genes to the ancestors of modern populations, but more research is needed to confirm this.
As if to show how much more there still is to learn about the intricate complexities of ancient human interbreeding, yet another unknown population of archaic humans appears to have been present in Asia and Oceania around the time that the ancestors of modern humans arrived here. And, as was the human way, they also interbred with each other. This unknown archaic human lineage was detected by researchers who published their findings in January of 2019. As I discussed previously, it was already known that modern human ancestors in this region had interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, but this genetic evidence hinted at a third archaic population getting in the mix. This unknown human was either related to the Neanderthal plus Denisovan lineage, or it may have been a lineage that diverged early on from all other Denisovans. So it's not quite a super-archaic human that originated from a very early branch on the family tree, but it's also something that's not quite Denisovan or Neanderthal in nature. We do know for a fact that some truly super-archaic human species were living in Southeast Asia up until relatively recently, and this isn't just because of genetic data. we actually have some direct fossil evidence of their remains. One of these is Homo floresiensis, commonly nicknamed the Hobbits, who lived on the island of Flores in Indonesia from around 1 million to maybe 50,000 years ago. The other that we know of is Homo luzonensis, which lived in Luzon in the Philippines from about 134 to 50,000 years ago. Both species were short in stature, with Floresiensis probably standing around 3'6", while Luzonensis might have ranged between 4'8" and 4'11". The small heights in these species are likely both cases of insular dwarfism, in which a species shrinks over the generations in response to the limited resources of an island ecosystem. The exact classification of these island dwellers has been discussed at length by scientists, and it might be that they descend from one of those very early human dispersals undertaken by Homo erectus as they migrated to this part of the world from Africa. Alternatively, some have speculated that they may be descendants of an even more ancient and previously unrecognized human migration, perhaps by a far more archaic species such as Homo habilis, since the island species have some features that appear particularly primitive. In these cases then, Homo floresiensis and luzonensis would definitely count as super-archaic humans that had survived until relatively recent times. However, another hypothesis that's come up in some papers is the idea that Homo floresiensis and luzonensis might actually be close genetic relatives of the Denisovans. This has been proposed as a way to explain the mystery of why so many modern human populations from this part of the world have particularly high levels of Denisovan ancestry, despite there being no fossil remains found from here that are actually attributable to the Denisovans. However, this idea doesn't really seem too plausible, considering that Floresiensis, at least, was likely living here long before Denisovans split from Neanderthals. Plus, a very recent study has also found that a human mandible fossil found in Taiwan actually belonged to a male Denisovan, making this the first confirmed fossil evidence for Denisovans in warmer and more humid climates, and indicating that these humans presumably could indeed have lived across island Southeast Asia as well. So for the moment, it seems the most widely accepted idea is that the island dwarf humans are descended from Homo erectus migrations. But what about the possibility that the island-dwelling super-archaics could have interbred with modern human ancestors in these regions anyway? They would have been living here when the ancestors of modern populations arrived, so hypothetically it's possible. Well, researchers decided to look for evidence of this in a paper published in 2021, but found no indication of significant genetic contributions from super-archaics in modern humans. So it's unlikely that breeding between Floresiensis or Luzonensis and the ancestors of modern populations occurred. Another recently discovered species that can be considered a super-archaic human was uncovered in South Africa in 2013. This is another small-bodied species that's been found in several groups comprising multiple individuals, all entombed in a cave system known as the Rising Star Cave, located within the cradle of humankind. This is Homo naledi, a truly fascinating human species. These people would have been on average about 4'9" in height, and their skeletons show features similar to some pretty ancient human species, such as having quite small brains. This meant that when Homo naledi was first discovered, scientists thought they must have lived between 2 and 1 million years ago. However, they later dated the sediments in the cave as well as teeth from the humans themselves, and found that they existed just 335 to 236,000 years ago. This suggests that Naledi is an example of a late surviving relict species of a much more ancient grade of human that managed to live on in Africa until surprisingly recently. So recently in fact, that they were alive here at the same time that Homo sapiens emerged, some 300,000 years ago. This has led to some speculation that Homo naledi may have contributed to the modern genetics of Homo sapiens through interbreeding events. But for now, we simply don't know if Homo naledi and ancient Homo sapiens interbred. And considering that genetic information is proving difficult to extract from the naledi bones, it may be a while before we can find out definitively if parts of their genome are present in any other humans. Still, the discovery of Homo naledi being a small-brained, super-archaic human species inhabiting Africa just over 200,000 years ago infers that there could have been several such species and populations of diverse human lineages that made it into recent times in Africa. Perhaps the continent was home to multiple survivors from the very early stages of human diversification that persisted for many hundreds of thousands of years, until just one species remained. It's a tantalizing thought, and hopefully future fossil discoveries can reveal much more about super-archaic diversity in Africa and the world at large. So then, to summarize everything, who exactly were the super-archaic humans and why are they important? They were most likely species of humans that either descended from Homo erectus or from a species that branched off the human family tree at a similar sort of time. Or, of course, they may have been Homo erectus itself. The really intriguing part of this mystery is that we just don't know for sure. The Homo erectus grade of humans are simply the ones we have some direct fossil evidence for, and they would have been in the right places at the right times for it to be possible that this is who mated with the more derived human species, the Neanderthals, Denisovans, and anatomically modern humans. And the term super-archaic human can also be applied to the few species we know from direct fossil evidence that split off from other humans a long time ago, but survived until relatively recently in geological terms. So Homo floresiensis, luzonensis, and naledi would all count as super-archaics. The super-archaic humans are also important as a way of highlighting how far we've come in terms of understanding the intricate complexities of our own past, as well as illustrating how much we still have left to discover, with so many details still needing to be worked out. Far from being the simple ladder-like progression from quadrupedal apes to upright-standing Homo sapiens that human evolution is all too often portrayed as, the mystery of the super-archaic ghost population interbreeding events shows the true nature of our evolution as a bush-like mess, with gene flow between long-separated branches at various points in our history. Clearly, throughout our evolution, humans have looked at anything else vaguely human-shaped and apparently been really into it. The genetic legacy of the super-archaic humans, along with that of the Neanderthals and the Denisovans, demonstrates just how much our long-lost cousins contributed to the modern biology of the human race. They shaped the deep past of our species in fundamental ways, and ultimately will have an impact on the future of the planet, as Homo sapiens has spread out into the world and continues to irrevocably change the face of the Earth. The archaic humans will live on, for as long as our own species survives. Thank you for watching, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to my other channel, 7 Days of Science. Over on this channel, my co-presenters and I make weekly videos covering all the most fascinating science news of the past week. So if you'd like a good way to keep up to date with the latest discoveries, you might like what we do over there. We also have a Patreon page where you can support us in return for some fun bonus content. Also, if you're a fan of science and cool notebooks, then be sure to check out the amazing designs by Atoms to Astronauts, and use our affiliate link in the description below to get 10% off. Please do like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it, and be sure to press that bell icon so you don't miss our next upload, and so you can learn more about our world, its history, and the wonderful life that surrounds us all.